Welcome to another Colors of Prog. I'm Louis Paul, your host. Season 3, Episode 12. I'm calling this one Sounds Like Yes. Before I return from the dark side of the moon, floating out in space, I had an idea. There's a lot of bands that, not tribute bands, not cover bands, not whatever. And there's some of them are quite good out there. I've seen a number of them over the years. Some of them very good. And some are even endorsed by Yes, the band themselves. So, why Sounds Like Yes? Well, actually, one of these is totally not Yes related, except for the music. I cheated a little bit. So, Aelian, The Watcher, front and back. Aelian, an Italian band formed in 1992. They released two albums in the 90s. The Watcher, this one, in 92. Meeting the Watcher in 93. In 2000, almost 10 years later, they released A Tree Under the Colors. All these were released on the French Musea label. It's a prog-oriented label. Musea really puts out a lot of good music, a lot of good bands. And it just goes to show you that this Italian band couldn't find any label interested in their music in their home country. It happens a lot, though. Swedish bands are coming out in Italy. Nowadays, it's a little easier because Prague has turned, and there's all these different influences now. There's a resurgence in the past few years in progressive rock, thanks to people like Neil Morris and bands reuniting. Nectar. Bands never quit. Yes, it's there's a lot going on, and so. But in the 90s and in portion of the 1980s, it was harder, and in the early 2000s, I believe it was harder for bands who had really good music to get their music heard. And I'm going to mention some surprising people who also had to self-release their music, even though they were associated with famous bands, believe it or not. So Aelian. Interestingly enough, this Italian band doesn't sound like the usual 70s prog throwback, but they're pretty enjoyable. All the songs are sung in near perfectly accented English, and the music itself is a homage or recreation of sorts to the popular proggy pop that ruled U.S. airways in the 80s and 90s. I mean, look no further than 90125 era Yes, with a sprinkling of Kansas, I kid you not, and possibly Saga, or even Heart. Find this one. I highly recommend the first two. I have the third on order. I haven't listened to it yet, so I can't comment on that. But Aelian, Aelian, Italian band, The Watcher. Now, it may not be that easy to find, but I just really, Mark Aixer, Aixer, who also plays bass, is a singer. A gentleman named Max is a guitarist and also sings. Maurizio and Twagnola also on vocals and keyboards. And the drummer, Paolo Negroni, doesn't sing. But these guys have some amazing vocal harmonies. I put this on first listen, and over and over, I said, I want to hear this again. As few Prague-associated, Prague-type bands out there which have amazing vocal harmonies. Moon Safari's one. But earlier than them, there were these guys who probably a few people ever heard of. So, again, Aelian. If someone didn't tell you there was this obscure Italian band, you think it might be 90125 Outtakes or that good Kansas album you might have missed, and you're batting yourself crazy thinking, how did I miss this Kansas album? I kid you not. Aelian. From there, Squackett. Yes, Chris Squire and Steve Hackett. Squackett, A Life Within a Day. 2012. One has to be very careful when discussing any music involving a much beloved and now deceased Chris Squire of Yes, and is still with us Steve Hackett of Genesis fame. This is their one and only album, and it contains 9 tracks. Personally, I think using studio musicians as the backing band really takes us from feeling like a duo or even a group effort, and just I know there's something missing here. While Steve Hackett has been in what seems Steve Hackett has been on what seems like constant tours, except for the first 2 years of COVID and an enforced shutdown and touring and performance venues, he appears quite content with live performances of his Genesis-associated music when he was in that band. Don't kill me. You all know this is true. His solo albums, the early ones, are considered some of his best, but his later work sounds rather uninspired. A Life Within a Day often displays many songs with a half-tempo speed, and there's a sameness that becomes exhausting midway through. I'm not the only one. I mean, you could see many reviews. People said, I've given up on this album halfway through. But I know you can't do that. It's got Chris Squire on it, man. It's like, you get the rare opportunity to also hear Hackett sing, something he's left to more often than not to others in recent years, especially during those Genesis throwback shows. Probably the finest track is this opener, A Life Within a Day, with its quasi-Middle Eastern feel and tuning. There are some nice vocal harmonies. I mean, Chris Squire is involved, so how can there not be? And while Chris and Steve Hackett's voices are not similar, they sound interesting singing together. Probably this is the last 20 years is one of the rare opportunities you get to hear Steve Hackett actually sing lead on a couple of songs, or harmony lead, and he's not bad. Somebody should speak in his ear and say, hey, Steve, you're not a bad singer. You just need somebody to write better songs. And, Chris Squire, gentleman behind Yes, he wasn't the best songwriter. That's why Yes was a group effort. Except for the Fish album. Everybody knows that record. It's also interesting to hear Chris Squire engage with different vocal registers. Yes, he has a particular range, a certain key, and you can actually hear him experimenting with lower registers and higher registers, possibly to harmonize with Steve Hackett. And it's quite an interesting thing. Around this time period, Chris was working with Billy Sherwood on a number of projects, including Conspiracy and some of those Prog Collective tribute albums, but he also revived a pre-Yes band called Sin, S-Y-N. The production on Squackett is fine enough, and since Squire did not have much of a solo output, it's nice to have more music from him, especially now. Even if this album, I would have to say, is less than spectacular. Oh, no, I wanted to say one song unused from the Yes album, um, Fly From Here, the Fly From Here sessions with Benoit David, a tune that Yes actually played live with Benoit during those tours. Aliens Are Only Us from the Future gets new life here. And it may be the second best song cut on Squackett. I'd say for completists only, yes. Squire and Hackett fans, of which there are so many, yes, of course. Um, but it's music, and sometimes you can go back to something later on and revisit it, and you'll hear something different, and you'll like it more or less. Next, I have an oddity and a rarity. More Chris Squire and Billy Sherwood, Conspiracy Live. Yeah, it's rather unexciting. So everyone into Prog knows the name of Chris Squire, the names of Chris Squire and Billy Sherwood. In researching Sherwood, I didn't know he worked with Motorhead. Yes, on a few of their albums, so there's that. Squire and Sherwood joined forces for the Yes Union album and tour, and appeared on the same for Talk, another Yes album. Sherwood also assisted with the studio tracks that appear on the two Yes Keys to Ascension albums. As a full-time band member on rhythm lead guitar, he appeared on Open Your Eyes and The Ladder, but left in 2000. Although Squire and Sherwood both played together in other non-Yes related projects, they joined forces for Conspiracy. That first album was released in 2000, and The Unknown in 2003. Both highly collectible in the prog rock marketplace. Why, you might ask? Because they released them on their own. Originally, everything Conspiracy has released, surprisingly, with the connections that Chris Squire and Billy Sherwood have with major band like Yes, but maybe these were fallen years for even prog rock. I don't know, the early 2000s, I think they were, right? And so they released them on their own, so there were small pressings probably. Cleopatra Records, Purple Pyramid, a division of Cleopatra Records, actually re-released a lot of these, what was out there in 2013, with, surprisingly, bonus DVD content, which was video of these songs being performed. So Conspiracy Live from 2007, cherry picks from the first two, even more rare, Conspiracy albums. And there's a track or two from Squire's Fish Out of Water and a Yes song or two. So it's a nice little collection. Point of interest is that it's not really a live album at all in the traditional sense, as in being performed in a theater in front of a live audience, but recorded live in the studio. The band besides Squire on vocals, bass, naturally, Sherwood on guitars and vocals, his brother Michael Sherwood and Scott Walton on keyboards, and future full-time member of Yes, drummer Jay Shellen. It's a fine late 80s, early 90s inspired sounding collection of songs, but this seems to be Sherwood's thing, but that's okay. A lot of Billy Sherwood stuff, even Arc of Life. The inspiration of the 80s, 90s music is there, and you know what? That's his thing. That's fine. He was a good choice to replace Chris Squire. He was chosen by Chris Squire to replace him in Yes. When Chris was very ill, he just like, no, I work with this guy. This guy sounds like me with the same vocal register. He plays that trebly bass like I do. Boom. So the 2013 Purple Pyramid Cleopatra Records release contains a DVD of the same live performances on the audio disc, and there's some behind-the-scenes footage on this. The thing I find interesting is that's in Squire Sherwood collaborations is how much they sound similar vocally. So it's like hearing a double-track lead singer. As Chris Squire fans might want to track this down, as it does feature rare video footage. And another plus, it's one of the better Billy Sherwood associated recordings with good sound and terrific bass response. Maybe because the production is attributed to the band. I don't know. Chris Squire, of course, passed in June of 2015 of an illness, a fast-acting bout of acute leukemia. And as I mentioned, at Chris Squire's strong suggestion, Billy Sherwood became Yes's bass guitarist singer after his death. Although there's been many live albums from Yes tours, there's only been one studio album, The Quest, released in 2021. I'm talking about after Chris Squire had passed. And it's the Quest is also the first to feature Jay Shellen on additional percussion and the last to feature Alan White. That was just a point of reference. So, one more. Circa HQ. This is from 2009. One of the more surprising progressive rock team-ups of the past 20 years that few people don't even know about. That only few people know about, the most people don't know about it, was this band featuring original Yes keyboardist Tony Kaye, who joined the band in '68 and appears on their first three albums, Yes, Time and a Word, and the Yes album, before leaving in 1971. He rejoined the band Yes in 2019, playing with Patrick Moraz, who also played a relayer, and they both guested on Yes's live 50th anniversary tour, various shows. Alan White. Yeah. Had been the drummer for Yes since 1973's Tales from Topographic Oceans. Billy Sherwood, who I've just spoken of, and Jimmy Haun of the band's Logic, and they also appeared on the Yes album and tour for Union in 1991 before joining Sheryl Crow's band, and I believe other bands, is singing on this. And more recently, he's on the Yes spinoff band Arc of Light, featuring Sherwood, current Yes singer John Davison, and Jay Shellen. And Jay Shellen is the drummer on this. I mentioned Alan White because on the earlier than this Circa album, Alan White was the drummer, but on HQ, he was replaced by Jay Shellen. So there's all kinds of weird stuff going here. Anyway, not much like Yes, or as others into progressive rock have mentioned, not much like Asia. And I don't hear an Asia sound or connection, but this is quite good. The band is quite good. In the best progressive rock tradition, songs are long for the most part, with, if it's not too late, running 11 minutes. Chasing After Guests, 7 minutes. We Can Last, 10 minutes. And remaining all the way, 13 minutes. Even Billy Sherwood's Chris Squire sounding vocals are stronger than usual, often with Jimmy Haun and Jay Shellen adding some really nice harmonies. And it's really nice hearing Tony Kaye on various keyboards with his own unique particular sound, especially on the Hammond organ. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these Circa albums, like Conspiracy, were also self-released and immediately went out of print because they only could afford to print so many of them. And Purple Pyramid, a division of Cleopatra Records. It's funny because I remember back in the days of punk, and post-punk, Cleopatra was a label that handled a lot of that kind of music. So it's nice to see they got involved with this. These reissues, really nice. I mean, I'd say, again, this is really good. You know, Conspiracy live with Chris Squire in the band, with Sherwood, and the Circa HQ. They're both really great, yes, associated discs. And again, I could tell you recently I did spot them on Bandcamp in the was it Purple Pyramid Bandcamp page. So like run quickly because I don't really know how many of these they have in stock. So today I discussed Aelian, Squackett, Conspiracy, and Circa, not in that alphabetical order. And this was Season 3, Episode 12 of The Colors of Prog. I hope you enjoy the show. Come back soon. I have to prepare to land. Bye.